banned from most Bibles for centuries, hidden in Ethiopia monasteries, and only recently brought back to light. The Book of Enoch stands like a sealed gate at the edge of sacred history. One night in a dream, beneath the cold air of winter, I found myself walking a narrow path between light and shadow. A voice whispered through the wind, "Will you open the forbidden book?" In that moment I understood this was not about curiosity but obedience. Hebrews chapter 11 declares, "By faith Enoch was taken so that he did not experience death because he pleased God." Those few words contain the entire blueprint of spiritual warfare. To walk with God is not to float above life but to move through it in holy rhythm, step for step with the Creator. Enoch's disappearance was not escape. It was victory. It did not vanish. He crossed the battlefield and reached the other side. Today, in the modern empire of noise, believers face a war of distraction. The enemy's weapon is subtle. Exhaustion, cynicism, endless motion. He whispers through the glow of screens, through anxiety, through 1,000 small compromises. And so many fall without realizing they have left the front line. Yet the strategy of heaven remains unchanged. Be still and know that I am God. The stillness of prayer is the most feared sound in hell. Enoch's story calls us back to that silence. He did not argue. He did not demand signs. He simply walked. Every step was an act of faith, every breath, a declaration that God is enough. To walk with God is to resist the culture of hurry and the tyranny of fear. It is to choose presence over performance, communion over control. The true soldier of faith fights not by shouting but by standing, not by striving but by surrendering. Faith is not a fortress to hide behind. It is a weapon forged in surrender. When a believer bows in prayer, the enemy trembles because he knows the campaign of heaven has begun again. The battle plan is not written in strategies of men, but in whispers of obedience. The fiercest warriors are those who walk quietly, yet carry the light of eternity in their step. Tonight I write this as a declaration, a soldier's vow before the throne of God. I choose to stand on the frontier between light and shadow. I raise my weapon, the word, and I wear the helmet of salvation. I will guard my thoughts as I guard the gates of my home. For every day begun in silence is a day won in battle. Your challenge is this. Write one single vow, one sentence of surrender. Say it aloud, as if heaven listens and hell watches. Today, I walk with my Father in silence for 15 minutes before I begin the day. When you speak it, you are not forming a habit. You are issuing a decree. Every minute you give to God is ground reclaimed from the enemy. Have you ever wondered why the Bible simply says Enoch walked with God and then was no more? Because God took him one line. One mystery that has echoed for millennia. Why him? Why did heaven interrupt the natural order of life and death? In that single sentence hides a battle plan for every believer who wants to walk with God in a world drowning in noise. Genesis chapter 5 verse 24 records it plainly. And Hebrews chapter 11 verse 5 expands it. By faith Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death. For he was commended as one who pleased God. That phrase, please God, is not a poetic compliment. It is a declaration of spiritual warfare. It means Enoch aligned his rhythm to heaven's command cadence. He learned the divine discipline of walking instead of running, listening instead of speaking, obeying instead of debating. In my vision, I see him not floating in clouds, but marching through enemy territory with calm authority. His heart synchronized with the heartbeat of the Creator. For us who live in the modern empire of distraction, this single verse is not ancient poetry. It is a weapon. Every notification, every argument, every anxious thought is a small ambush set by the invisible enemy. The only counterattack is to walk, not sprint, with God. To reclaim the slow, sacred rhythm that the world calls wasteful. Walking with God means giving him real time, undivided and unhurried. It means letting the word set your pace. Not your phone. It means silence before sunrise, listening before reacting, surrender before strategy. When Dante, the pilgrim in me, looks around the modern inferno of commerce, media, and endless debate, I see souls running in circles, chasing smoke, exhausted yet proud of their speed. But Enoch walked, that was his secret weapon. Walking with God is not a gentle stroll through gardens. It is a disciplined march through battlefield terrain. It means stepping where he steps, even when the path leads through fog or fire. When the prophets speak of faith, they describe it as obedience under uncertainty, loyalty in the absence of applause. The walk is slow because it requires awareness, repentance, and constant realignment. Each step is a small act of rebellion against the culture of haste. Each prayer is a shield lifted against despair. In the blueprint of spiritual warfare, Enoch's life gives us 3 tactics. First, consistency is a weapon. The devil fears rhythm more than intensity. A believer who prays 15 minutes every morning is more dangerous than one who shouts for a day and forgets the next. Second, intimacy is armor. Walking with God means proximity. When you stay close, the enemy cannot isolate you. Third, obedience is strategy. You may not know the map, but if you follow the commander, you never get lost. Imagine what it would mean if every believer across America reclaimed one silent moment each morning, before work, before worry, just to walk with God. The spiritual atmosphere would shift. The noise of fear would quiet. Families would begin to heal because peace would enter through the gate of discipline. My brothers and sisters, the battlefield today is not physical. It is the mind. The enemy does not need to destroy your faith if he can distract it. But God has given you a simple yet powerful weapon. The same one Enoch carried daily communion. You do not need visions of angels to win this war. You need faithfulness in small steps. The angels already walk beside those who walk with the Lord. Tonight, as I close my eyes, I picture Enoch's footprints glowing faintly across the centuries. A golden path through darkness. It is narrow, yes, but it is safe because it was carved by obedience, and that is the invitation extended to you now. The challenge is this: write one personal vow, just one line, say it aloud as a declaration. Today, I walk with my Father in silence for 15 minutes before I begin the day. Then keep that promise. Make it your daily march. Do it not as ritual, but as warfare. For every minute you reclaim, for God is a territory taken back from the enemy. Every sacred word has its own pilgrimage, and the Book of Enoch has walked one of the longest, from the deserts of ancient Judea to the mountains of Ethiopia, from the language of Aramaic to the flowing syllables of Ge'ez. It has survived empires, floods, and the silence of 1,000 forgotten years. When I first learned that fragments of this book were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran, I felt as though heaven had left a trail of breadcrumbs across history, reminding us that divine truth can never be buried for long. The hands that copied these scrolls were not merely scribes, they were warriors of memory, guarding revelation against the corrosion of time. Each letter written on parchment was a shield raised against oblivion. The journey of this text is not just historical, it is spiritual proof that what God breathes into existence cannot be erased. In those caves near the Dead Sea, fragments of Enoch rested beside the writings of prophets and priests. Written in Aramaic, the common language of that era, the text spoke to the ordinary faithful, not just to scholars or kings. It was a revelation that walked among shepherds and laborers, not trapped in temples. Later, as empires rose and languages changed, the words migrated into Greek and then into the ancient Ethiopian tongue of Ge'ez, where they would find refuge for centuries. While the world forgot, the Ethiopian church remembered While Europe dismissed African monks preserved, it is as if God chose a hidden corner of the earth to guard a weapon meant for the end times, waiting for the right generation to rediscover it. Think of that. While kingdoms fell and nations fought, in a monastery high above the clouds, quiet hands copied the same words that once burned on the tongues of prophets. The Book of Enoch did not merely survive, it endured through faithfulness, and now, after being exiled for so long, it has returned to confront us again. The question is, why now? Perhaps because we are once again living in an age where truth is being edited, faith is being diluted, and the line between light and darkness grows thin. The rediscovery of Enoch is not coincidence. It is a signal and a call to arms for the mind and soul. For the believer, this story of preservation is more than history. It is a mirror. How many truths in our own lives have we allowed to fade under dust? How many words from God have we hidden in caves of neglect, just as the scrolls at Qumran waited to be found? There are revelations within you waiting to be unearthed. Your memory of what God once spoke is your own sacred scroll. Guard it, copy it, live it. The enemy attacks what he fears most, and he fears remembrance. Forgetfulness is his territory. That is why your daily discipline of reading, writing, and remembering the word is not routine. It is warfare. The scrolls of Qumran remind us that truth is never truly lost, only waiting for faithful hands. In every age, God appoints keepers of his revelation, men and women who carry light through centuries of darkness. In our time, that keeper must be you. Every verse you read, every word you speak in faith, every act of obedience is a fragment of divine truth being preserved again in this modern desert of noise. You are the new scribe of heaven, the living parchment where God writes his covenant. The challenge is this: create your own battle plan for study for 60 days. Take one passage of scripture, read it, write it, and speak it aloud 3 days each week, one chapter each day. One truth written down. Make your home a modern Qumran, a place where truth is copied, guarded, and lived. The Book of Enoch survived because faithful hearts refused to let silence win. Let that same spirit live in you now. There are stories so ancient that they echo in the marrow of creation, and among them none strike with such terrible beauty as the tale of the Watchers. These were not nameless beings from myth, but angels, sentinels of light, who once stood in the courts of the Almighty and chose to cross a forbidden line. They descended upon Mount Hermon and made a pact that would change the destiny of the earth. Their names were known. Their voices once sang in the harmony of heaven. Yet pride turned their song into rebellion. Genesis chapter 6 tells us that the sons of God saw the daughters of men and took them as wives, and from that union came giants. The Nephilim, beings of immense strength and insatiable appetite. Where heaven had set boundaries, they built bridges of disobedience. They did not fall by accident. They fell by decision. As I walked through the ruins of an old monastery, once built near the shadow of Mount Hermon, I imagined the weight of that first rebellion pressing upon the stones. What drove a being of light to envy flesh and blood? It was not desire alone, but arrogance. The belief that they could create their own order apart from God. In their pride, they revealed the oldest lie, that creation can exist without the Creator. It is the same whisper that tempts humanity still. You can be your own God. You can decide what is good and evil. You can rewrite what was written in fire. That is the serpent's theology, dressed in new language. The Watchers brought with them forbidden knowledge. They taught men the art of weapons, turning iron into tools of death. They revealed the secrets of sorcery, of vanity, of manipulation. What they called enlightenment was corruption. A weapon placed in unready hands, and thus the world learned to kill faster, desire deeper, and rebel harder. It was the birth of organized warfare, not of nations but of spirits. Knowledge became the first poison when taken without holiness. Yet even in this darkness, God raised a messenger. Enoch, still a man, was called to deliver judgment to the fallen. Imagine that reversal. The very beings who once stood above man now trembled before a mortal who walked with God. This is divine irony, and it reveals a truth for every believer. The power to confront darkness does not come from status but from surrender. When a heart walks with God, it carries authority that angels fear to challenge. The story of the Watchers is not a distant myth. It is a mirror of our own age. We live surrounded by knowledge once thought impossible. We hold the fire of the heavens in our hands. We reshape life itself. Yet the question remains the same. Have we learned obedience or only expanded rebellion? The Watchers' sin was not curiosity but corruption. Not discovery but defiance. They used revelation without reverence. Today the same temptation calls from screens and laboratories, from pride disguised as progress. The believer must unmask the same enemy now hidden behind sophistication. The warfare is not fought with swords but with discernment. The fallen still whisper through culture, through ideology, through the hunger for control. They teach new forms of old rebellion, convincing man that freedom is found outside of divine order. But the blueprint of heaven has not changed. Order brings peace. Rebellion breeds ruin. In this spiritual battlefield, you are not a spectator. You are a soldier. Your vigilance is your shield. Your purity is your armor. Every time you reject the whisper that says you are enough without God, you drive another fallen spirit back into the abyss. Each act of obedience closes a portal. The Watchers once opened your prayer, your fasting, your humility. These are weapons that angels wielded before time began. Tonight, as I meditate on the fall of the Watchers, I see their tragedy written in fire across the sky. What began as brilliance ended as bondage. Pride turned wings into chains. The same fate awaits every soul that exalts self above surrender. Let this be our warning and our call to arms. The invisible enemy does not rest, but neither does the army of light. The challenge is this: identify one gate in your life where the enemy still whispers. Is it your eyes, your ambition, for your tongue? Close that gate through prayer. Speak this declaration aloud. I break my agreement with darkness. I surrender my desires to the command of heaven. I will guard the gate of my heart with the word and the spirit. When you do, you join the battle that began on Mount Hermon, and you help restore the order the Watchers once defied. Out of the forbidden union between the Watchers and the daughters of men came the Nephilim, beings of vast size and appetite whose very existence defied creation's order. They were giants not only in form but in arrogance, a living monument to rebellion. In the beginning their presence must have seemed glorious, a strange wonder of strength and brilliance. Yet soon their hunger revealed itself, a hunger that could not be satisfied by grain or fruit or cattle. They devoured everything, and when the earth's supply failed, they turned upon mankind. The land became a graveyard, the rivers ran with blood, and the cries of the innocent reached heaven. This was not merely a story of monsters. It was the consequence of unrestrained desire. When creation steps outside divine law, chaos feeds upon it until nothing remains. As I stood before the ruins of an ancient city buried beneath centuries of dust, I imagined their footsteps, the trembling of the earth beneath their march. They were symbols of ungoverned power, flesh animated by the spirit of pride. The ancients feared them, but they also worshipped them. They built idols in their image and called them gods. Thus sin became culture and rebellion became religion. It is no different today. We have traded stone idols for shining screens, but the worship is the same. The Nephilim live on in every heart that exalts desire above obedience. The Book of Enoch describes how the giants turned the earth into a battlefield. When food failed, they devoured man and beast alike. When the world could no longer bear their violence, creation itself cried out to God. This cry, the groaning of the ground and the mourning of the air, became the call for divine judgment. And so heaven answered. The flood was not simply punishment, it was deliverance. God washed the world to cleanse it of the corruption that began with the watchers and multiplied through their offspring. But even after the waters receded, their influence lingered. Their spirits, Enoch says, became wandering shadows, evil forces without bodies, forever seeking to corrupt again what had once been pure. When I read that passage, I see the pattern of every fallen empire and every broken soul. The cycle repeats when pride breeds power, when power feeds greed, and when greed devours everything holy. The giants are not gone, they have changed form. Today they rise in systems of exploitation, in the hunger for fame, in nations that consume the weak. They build towers again, not of stone but of data and ambition. The same old bloodline of rebellion beats within modern progress, and once again the earth groans for deliverance. The Nephilim are the personification of unrestrained appetite. Their story is a mirror held before our own generation. What are we feeding that grows too large to control? Is it our vanity, our comfort, our need to dominate? Every unchecked desire becomes a giant, and every giant eventually turns against its maker. The only way to defeat it is through surrender. No flood will save us now. Only repentance will. Yet within this darkness, God still raises Enoch, men and women who will walk with him when others run toward corruption. You may not have the strength of a giant, but you have something far greater, the spirit that raised Christ from the dead. That spirit is your weapon, your blueprint for victory, your deliverance from the hunger of this world. Look around and you will see the battlefield. It is not fought with swords, but with desires. Every temptation is a test of loyalty. Every indulgence is an invitation to serve the wrong master. To stand against this tide is not easy. But neither was Enoch's walk. He walked with God in a world that had forgotten how, and because of that, he was taken, not destroyed. The challenge is this: identify your giant, the appetite that rules your choices, name it aloud, confess it before God, and declare your battle plan. Replace that appetite with a discipline of devotion. When the hunger rises, feed your spirit instead of your flesh. Speak this vow: I will not be devoured by my own desire. My body is a temple, not a battlefield. I will walk in the rhythm of obedience until hunger turns into holiness. The giants fell once, and they will fall again, not by might, not by power, but by surrender to the Lord of hosts. When the cries of the earth reached heaven, judgment began to move like a gathering storm. The corruption of the watchers and the hunger of the Nephilim had poisoned the ground, and the sky itself seemed heavy with grief. The Almighty declared that the world must be cleansed, not destroyed for vengeance, but washed for deliverance. The waters of the flood were not punishment alone. They were mercy in motion, a reset of creation, a purification of what had been defiled. It was as if God himself drew a sword of water to cut away the infection spreading through his work. In that moment, the world learned that judgment is not cruelty. It is love wearing armor. Enoch, the messenger of this decree, walked among the fallen and the fearful. He warned, he wept, he wrote. Imagine the weight of that task, to stand before celestial rebels and deliver the sentence of their Creator. The watchers who once dazzled the heavens now trembled before the words of a man who had learned obedience. It was not power that made Enoch mighty. It was faith. He had walked with God long enough to know that mercy and justice are two sides of the same flame. His voice carried the authority of heaven, because his heart carried the humility of earth. That is the secret. Every warrior of light must learn that power without surrender becomes pride. But surrender transforms weakness into divine strength. As the flood rose, the world drowned in its own reflection. Mountains disappeared beneath the judgment they had witnessed. Cities that had once boasted of their giants were reduced to whispers beneath the waves. But even as destruction fell, salvation floated. Noah, the descendant of Enoch, built an ark under the same instruction of obedience. The flood was the battlefield where faith stood against chaos. The ark was not just a vessel of wood, it was a blueprint of grace. Every plank nailed in place was an act of trust. Every animal gathered was a testimony that creation still had a future. The same faith that saved Enoch from death now preserved Noah from destruction. One was taken, the other was carried, both delivered by obedience. When I picture the flood, I see more than water. I see the tears of a grieving creator cleansing the world. He loved too much to abandon. I see the waves as instruments of renewal, the wind as breath over a newborn world. The same God who judges also rebuilds, and his wrath always carries a seed of restoration. When the rain stopped and the sun returned, the covenant began. A rainbow stretched across the sky like a warrior's bow hung in peace. The war between corruption and creation was not over, but the promise had been made that never again would water erase the world, but fire would one day purify it completely. For us, the flood is a symbol not of doom but of decision. Every believer faces their own rising water. The flood may come as loss, failure, sickness, or silence. It comes to drown what must die, so that what is eternal may rise. The question is not whether the water will come, but whether you have built your ark. Your ark is not made of wood. It is built from worship, obedience, and trust. Each act of faith is a beam, each prayer a nail, each surrender a seal against despair. The waters will rise, but those who walk with God will not drown. They will ascend. The challenge is this: when the flood of fear or failure comes, do not fight the water, rise upon it. Say this aloud: I will not sink beneath what God has allowed. My ark is his promise. My breath is his spirit. My deliverance is certain. The same God who lifted Noah above the flood will lift me above my storm. Every trial is a cleansing, every wave a weapon against the old self. I will walk in obedience until the rain becomes my refuge. In the stillness of the night, when the stars burn like unspoken words, I have often wondered what Enoch saw when the angel Uriel opened before him the blueprint of the heavens. This was not mere astronomy. It was revelation. The Book of Enoch speaks of the sun and moon passing through gates, of stars moving in perfect obedience, of time itself flowing according to divine law. To the modern ear, it may sound poetic, yet in truth it was a message of war against chaos. In every age, darkness tries to twist time to make man forget the rhythm of the Creator. But the heavens declare the glory of God, and their order is our weapon against confusion. Uriel revealed to Enoch that the year was made of 364 days, a perfect design of 12 months and 4 sacred pauses marking each season. The ancients who followed this order believed that living in harmony with divine time was an act of worship. Every sunrise was a call to vigilance, every sunset a reminder of rest. But as rebellion grew, humanity began to follow other rhythms, other calendars. False clocks built by ambition and fear. The corruption of time became the corruption of the soul. When man no longer marks his days by heaven's light, he becomes a slave to the world's noise. I stood once beneath a midnight sky in the desert, where the air was so still I could hear my own heartbeat. The stars moved silently above me. patient and faithful. They did not hurry. They did not compete. They simply obeyed. In that moment, I understood that obedience is the heartbeat of creation. The planets do not argue with their orbits, nor do the seasons demand a new order. Only man rebels against rhythm. The sin of the watchers was not only lust or pride, it was the refusal to stay in their appointed course. They stepped out of divine timing, and the world fell into disorder. So too, when we abandon God's order of time, we invite chaos into our hearts. The astronomical book is not a lesson in mathematics. It is a reminder of divine precision. Every star is a verse written by the author of eternity. Every rotation is a sermon on faithfulness. When Uriel taught Enoch how light governs darkness, he was teaching more than physics. He was revealing that even the cosmos bows to law. The believer who learns to walk in rhythm with heaven becomes unshakable. The sun may rise and fall. Nations may crumble, but the one aligned with divine order remains steady. In the ancient monasteries, monks built their lives around this celestial rhythm. They prayed at dawn, at noon, at dusk, and at midnight, not to keep time, but to sanctify it. Their discipline was not routine, it was warfare. Each hour offered to God was a strike against the enemy's strategy of distraction. They knew what the modern world has forgotten. That time itself is a battlefield. The devil does not need to make us sin if he can make us waste our hours. Every moment lost to vanity is a gate open to despair. To live by divine time is to reclaim your inheritance. Your days are not random. They are assignments. Morning is your call to readiness. Afternoon, your season of endurance. Evening, your test of gratitude. Night, your altar of surrender. Enoch saw the universe as a temple in motion. Each cycle a hymn, each orbit a prayer. To walk with God is to move with that rhythm until your life itself becomes part of the song. The challenge is this: set one sacred rhythm in your day. It may be the first hour after waking or the last before sleep. Guard it as holy ground. Speak this declaration aloud. My time belongs to the Lord of time. I will no longer be ruled by hurry or fear. Every hour I surrender becomes a weapon against confusion. I will walk in the order of heaven until my days beat in rhythm with eternity. The visions of Enoch turned then from stars and seasons to the courtroom of eternity. I saw in my mind the throne of the great glory, a light beyond the light of the sun. And before it gathered the kings of the earth, the mighty ones, who once ruled with arrogance and forgot mercy. They stood stripped of title and crown, trembling as justice walked into the room. The first parable Enoch spoke was this: that every power built on pride must fall before the face of the righteous one. There was no bribe, no lawyer, no army that could defend them. Their kingdoms had been built on the bones of the weak, and the judge remembered every cry they ignored. The second parable revealed the figure that would preside over that judgment, the Son of Man, not born of rebellion, but hidden with God from the beginning. His presence was both terrifying and beautiful, a flame that purified as it burned. He was not a ruler chosen by men, but the embodiment of divine order, the one through whom all wrongs would be set right. The prophets called him the chosen one, the elect, the light of nations. Enoch saw him long before Bethlehem, long before the cross. The Son of Man was the promise written into the bones of creation, a warrior of mercy and justice, who would come when the world had lost its compass. As I meditated on this vision, I felt the weight of every injustice on earth, the rich crushing the poor, truth bent into lies, hearts numb to holiness. Yet Enoch's parable was not despair. It was hope wrapped in thunder. For every act of cruelty there is a reckoning. For every tear shed in silence there is a response from heaven. Judgment is not the end of love. It is love refusing to let evil reign forever. The Son of Man does not come to destroy life, but to restore balance, to cleanse creation from the stain of rebellion. The third parable spoke of renewal. When the mountains will bow, the seas will rejoice, and the faithful will shine like stars. The Son of Man will reign not from a palace, but from the hearts of the righteous. His rule will not be measured in armies, but in peace. Those who suffered for truth will be lifted. Those who mocked will fall, and the very earth will breathe again. It is the promise every weary believer carries, that injustice is temporary, but righteousness is eternal. When I think of that day, I do not see a court of fear, but a field of light. Judgment is not for condemnation alone. It is for clarity. On that day, everything hidden will be revealed, every lie unmasked, every secret motive exposed. For those who walk in truth, that revelation is freedom. For those who live in deceit, it is fire. The Son of Man comes not only to divide, but to heal, not only to condemn, but to redeem. The same fire that burns the chaff refines the gold. These parables are not ancient poetry. They are warnings written for us. In this age of comfort, many have forgotten that grace does not cancel justice. The same God who forgives also holds accountable. To live without reverence is to walk into battle without armor. The Son of Man watches, and his eyes miss nothing. Every word we speak, every choice we make builds our case for or against us. But those who belong to him need not fear the courtroom of heaven, for the judge himself has become their advocate. The challenge is this: examine your heart as if the Son of Man stands before you today. Name one injustice you have ignored, one place where you have turned away from truth. Bring it into the light through confession and action. Speak this declaration aloud: I will stand in the truth even when it costs me. I will walk in the light even when the world walks in shadow. My allegiance is to the Son of Man, my judge and my deliverer. In his justice I find peace, and in his fire I find purification. See, the visions came to Enoch not in daylight but in dreams, where symbols walked like living beings and truth spoke through shadows. He saw the story of creation told not through names but through creatures: bulls, sheep, lions, and eagles moved through the fields of time. Each one a nation, a people, a soul. What human history calls war, heaven calls parabole. Every rise and fall, every empire in exile, every whisper of rebellion was seen by Enoch as a movement in a vast spiritual drama. The faithful were sheep led by a true shepherd. The corrupt were beasts who devoured the flock. Angels appeared as men, watching, guiding, judging. Through these dream visions, history was stripped of pride and revealed as a mirror of the heart. The first vision unfolded like dawn over the mountains. Enoch saw Adam and Eve as white bulls, symbols of innocence and strength. He watched as darkness entered through deception, and the colors of creation dimmed. Generations passed as flocks multiplied, some following the voice of the shepherd, others wandering into the wilderness. He saw the flood come and go, the covenant renewed, the nations rise like wild beasts from the dust. Each symbol carried a warning: when man forgets who leads him, beasts rule again. The dream was not about ancient kingdoms, it was about us. Every human heart is a nation, every desira ruler, and whichever one we serve becomes our master. In the second vision, Enoch saw the flood again, but this time not as rain or destruction. It was the flood of corruption that begins within the soul when faith is forgotten. He saw the waters of deceit rising slowly, not in thunder but in silence. He saw the righteous cry for deliverance and the wicked laugh at their warnings. Then the heavens opened, and the waters of truth drowned every falsehood. When the flood subsided, the earth shone with a purity never seen before. In that moment I realized the flood is not only a memory of the past, but a prophecy for every generation. Whenever the world becomes deaf to God, judgment comes as mercy disguised in storm. These dream visions are not nightmares. They are wake-up calls. The symbols are invitations to see beyond flesh and politics, to perceive the war behind the world. The beasts of Enoch's vision live still. They roar in the marketplaces of greed. They fly in the skies of power. They prowl in the hearts of men who have traded reverence for comfort, yet amid the chaos stands the shepherd, the same one who called Enoch to walk with him. His rod and staff still guide. His voice still calls the scattered home. As I pondered these dreams, I felt their weight pressing upon the modern soul. The story has never ended. The flood, the beasts, the wars of the spirit, they unfold daily within us. We build cities of pride, altars to self, and then wonder why peace escapes us. The dream visions are an ancient mirror reflecting the truth we try to forget. There is no peace without surrender, no order without obedience. The shepherd still waits, but his call grows fainter in the noise of the world. Only those who seek silence can hear it. Yet the dream does not end in despair. Enoch saw the age of renewal, a time when the beasts would bow, when the flocks would be gathered, and when the earth itself would rest. He saw light rising from the east, cleansing follies, healing mountains, and turning weapons into plows. It was not fantasy. It was prophecy. The same God who ended the flood will end corruption. The same shepherd who called Enoch will call us home. The question is not whether renewal will come, but whether we will recognize it when it does. The challenge is this. Look at your life as Enoch looked at his dreams. What beast rules your heart? What voice have you obeyed without discernment? Fast from noise for one day. Speak this declaration aloud. I renounce the beasts within me. I break covenant with confusion and rebellion. I surrender my dreams to the voice of the true shepherd. My story will not end in flood or fear, but in renewal. My soul will walk with the one who restores all things. In the closing pages of his journey, Enoch no longer speaks in symbols or visions, but in the voice of a father to his children. His words are not wrapped in mystery, but carved in truth. He speaks to those who live in a world of injustice and asks them to hold the line. The Epistle of Enoch is not a prophecy of events, but a declaration of endurance. It calls every believer to stand when others fall, to trust when others flee, and to remember that faith is not a comfort, but a command. In those words I hear not only the echo of an ancient prophet, but the breath of a soldier who has seen the battlefield and still believes that victory belongs to the faithful. Enoch warns that corruption will return, that greed and violence will wear new faces, yet he promises that righteousness will not be forgotten. The righteous may suffer, but their suffering becomes seed, planted in the soil of eternity. The wicked may prosper, but their comfort is smoke, vanishing at dawn. He speaks of a day when the earth will tremble and the heavens will open, when the faithful will rise, not as ghosts, but as renewed beings. Clothed in light, death itself will kneel, and the tears of the oppressed will become rivers of joy. This is the promise that carried Enoch through the ages, that endurance is not wasted, that every act of faith echoes in eternity. As I read those words by candlelight one night, I felt them pierce deeper than history. They spoke to our generation, weary and distracted, longing for peace but afraid of surrender. The call is not to comfort but to courage. The world demands compromise, but heaven demands conviction. Endurance is the last weapon left when all others fail. When the armor grows heavy, when prayer feels dry, when silence stretches like a wilderness, that is when the true warriors rise. They stand not because they feel strong, but because they refuse to bow. The epistle reminds us that righteousness is not proven in miracles, but in endurance, to forgive when you could hate, to hope when you could despair, to pray when you could curse. These are the victories unseen by men, but celebrated in heaven. Every act of endurance is a declaration that God still reigns. The enemy cannot defeat a soul that will not quit. This is the warfare of saints. Quiet but relentless. Hilden but eternal. Enoch's message ends not with fear but with fire. He speaks of resurrection not as fantasy but as certainty. The righteous will rise and the world will be made new. Mountains will melt before the presence of God, and the faithful will shine brighter than the stars. Their reward is not gold or glory, but union with the one who made them. In that final vision, Enoch's voice fades, and the voice of eternity begins. I see now why his words survived when empires fell. The epistle is not a farewell. It is a torch passed from one generation to another. Its flame burns in every believer who refuses to surrender to despair. It is the same fire that burned in the hearts of the martyrs, for the same light that guides every soul walking through darkness toward the promise of dawn. The challenge is this: when trials come and faith trembles, speak this declaration aloud. I will endure. My pain will not be wasted. My faith will not be silenced. I walk with the God who remembers every tear. My resurrection is certain because his victory is eternal. Let this be your vow, your banner, your weapon, for endurance is not survival. It is triumph. And like Enoch, when your walk is complete, you will not be lost. You will be taken home. When the dust of centuries settled and the Book of Enoch was found again, the world had changed, but the war had not. The same spirits that whispered on Mount Hermon still move through the cities of men, and the same God who walked with Enoch still calls his children to rise. The rediscovery of this book was not coincidence. It was an awakening. It re-emerged not to satisfy curiosity, but to summon an army, the quiet army of believers who fight not with violence but with vision, who wield truth as their sword and faith as their shield. I imagine Enoch standing at the edge of time, watching the sons and daughters of the promise take their place in this final age of confusion. His eyes carry the reflection of both judgment and mercy. He has seen rebellion in heaven, corruption on earth, and the cleansing of the flood. Yet his message remains the same. Walk with God. That is the entire strategy of heaven, the blueprint for victory. It is not complexity that saves, it is communion. The greatest warfare is fought not on battlefields, but in hearts that choose obedience over pride. When James Bruce carried the Ethiopian manuscripts across deserts and seas, he was not just retrieving pages, he was carrying back a prophecy. The words that had slept in monasteries were ready to speak again. Then came the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, fragments that proved what the faithful already knew, that God never loses his word. He only hides it until the faithful are ready to receive it. The Book of Enoch returned to remind us that divine revelation is never buried, only waiting for warriors willing to dig. This book's journey mirrors our own. We too have been scattered, forgotten, misunderstood, yet preserved by grace. We too were lost in the chaos of the modern flood and found again by mercy. Like Enoch's writings, our lives bear marks of translation, fragments of pain, but still we carry the message. The Spirit writes on our hearts what time cannot erase. Every believer is a living scroll. Every prayer, a line of sacred ink. Every act of obedience, a verse of eternal truth. As I walk beneath the night sky and watch the stars that Enoch once studied, I feel the same stillness he must have felt. The heavens move with discipline, not desire. They do not hurry. They do not question. They simply shine. That is our calling, to shine in rhythm with the Creator until darkness has nowhere left to hide. The warfare of light does not end in conquest. It ends in transformation. The enemy's final defeat will not come through argument, but through glory. When the Son of Man appears, every false light will vanish, and those who walked with him will be lifted, as Enoch was, not by death, but by deliverance. The message of Enoch is not ancient history. It is present strategy. Walk with God, Guard your gates, stand in obedience, learn the rhythm of heaven, endure until endurance becomes joy. The hidden book has returned so that the hidden warriors might rise. Its pages are your orders, its stories, your training, its promise, your armor. The challenge is this: declare aloud your allegiance. Say, I am a warrior of light. My weapon is faith. My shield is obedience. My mission is love. I walk with the God who conquered death. I will not fear the flood, the darkness, or the fire. I was born for this battle, and I will finish my course in his presence. When you speak those words, you awaken the same fire that carried Enoch beyond death. The war of ages still rages, but the victory has already been written. The question now is not whether you will win, but whether you will walk. For those who walk with God, even the grave becomes a doorway.